matter of historical fact that it was a pronouncement he made regarding the controversy surrounding the Aurora and Kimwere dam project, and that in fact there was controversy at that particular point in time as to just how much money had been lost or alleged to be lost in that particular project. And the recommendation from ISPAC that I'm reading from the report, Madam Speaker, was that we should get the regular reports from government itself, including details one gets from the very initial pages of that manifesto, is that the Kenya Kwanza political coalition at that particular moment in time had properly diagnosed the problem with Kenya's debt. At least that's what they told us. And in fact, there is a paragraph that I wanted to borrow there. They said at the time of campaigns that the usual adage, the common adage that when you are in a hole, you should stop digging. That I have lifted word for word, Madam Speaker, from the glossy Kenya Kwanza manifesto for the last election. So the expectation was, and public pronouncements that followed the launch of that manifesto, was that we were going to see a stop in the borrowing that had been, had characterized the last regime, and that was the reason why we were in the hole that they said we were in. Madam Speaker, if you go to page 6 and 7 of the report of the Committee on Finance, they will tell you that in June 2023, Madam Speaker, the debt was at 10.2 trillion Kenya shillings. And by February of 2024, which is less than 8 months later, Madam Speaker, we were at 11.2 trillion. At that rate, in 8 months, our debt had ballooned by 1 trillion shillings. I have heard my majority leader also wax lyrical about the magic that was worked with the refinancing of the Eurobond. Madam Speaker, if you go to page 9 of the report of this committee, you will see reference there to the partial buyback of the Eurobond. But Madam Speaker, what the committee does not tell you is that we as a country in that buyback actually offered one of the highest interest rates, higher than any other country has done in Africa, Madam Speaker, at 10.37% for that Eurobond, for us to attract investors. And if you want comparisons, Madam Speaker, Cote d'Ivoire in January of this year offered or issued a Eurobond and their interest rate was 8.5%. Benin did the same in February at 7.5%, Madam Speaker. We have kicked the can down the road so that in 6 years' time, we will be paying investors the highest rate by any African state on a Eurobond. So it is not something to sing about, because the hole that we were told we were in and that this current regime promised to stop digging further is getting deeper and deeper. Madam Speaker, you will also see at page 8 of the report that the committee acknowledges that Kenya's public debt, although remaining sustainable, it still has a high risk of debt distress, which tells you that we shouldn't be celebrating anything as it is right now, because we are still under great risk of debt distress. Madam Speaker, let me conclude by making a few observations on some of the stakeholder submissions. But unfortunately, Madam Speaker, let me note that some of these submissions by key stakeholders to the committee did not find their way into the recommendations by the committee. And I don't understand why. Luckily for me, I'm seated next to one of the members of the committee. Senator Eddie will tell me why they ignored these important submissions from ISPAC. At page 21, Madam Speaker, paragraph 25, C, D, and E. I just want to read those recommendations, Madam Speaker, at page 21 of the report. No, do I have the right report, really? No, this is the right report. Sorry, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this is what the Institute of Certified Public Accountants recommend. Test for financial viability and consider absorption capacity constraints within the investment timelines. We should also they recommended, consider public-private partnerships as a form of financing development expenditure. Further, Madam Speaker, they recommended that we gradually retire expensive commercial loans for long-term concessional loans. And Madam Speaker, one of the recommendations that has actually been debated this afternoon when we were discussing another matter is that Parliament should demand regular reports on capital projects financed through debt from the National Treasury to enhance openness and transparency. The reports should include the corresponding feasibility studies, details of commitment fees, if any, and the project implementation status. Madam Speaker, this I think is coming from the perspective of what we saw in the last regime, that in fact money was borrowed, and the Auditor General himself told us that he could not trace a single project to which the money that was borrowed went to. Madam Speaker, we had the specter of projects such as the Aurora and Kimwarel dams. So that, Madam Speaker, if we were in this position, Parliament should be demanding regular reports. We should be shown why was this money borrowed, which projects had been identified to be supported through those borrowed funds, the feasibility studies, the commitment fees that had been paid. Because you remember, Madam Speaker, there was a controversy at that time with the Aurora and Kimwarel dams as to what commitment fees had actually been paid. And it involved the person of the current president, when he was the then deputy president, telling the country that it was a mere 9 billion shillings, just a small figure, 7 billion. 7 billion shillings, he told us that had been lost. Madam Speaker, so that if we have those details as Parliament... What is
your point of order? Senator Gloria, resume your seat.
Madam Speaker, I stand on Standing Order 101 on contents of speech. Reference 1, neither the personal conduct of the President nor the conduct of the Speaker or any other judge. Madam Speaker, it is not in order that Senator Edwin Sifuna is referencing the President and in the manner with which he's doing. This is based on our standing order. If he can be able to articulate his points without having to drag either the name of the President or the Speaker or any of the persons that are mentioned under Standing Order 101 under content of speech.
Madam Speaker, should I respond before you make a decision?
Yes, you could respond.
Yes,
through this
Madam Speaker, in fact, I am not discussing the conduct of the head of state. It is a matter of historical fact that it was a pronouncement he made regarding the controversy surrounding the Aurora and Kimwarel dam project, and that in fact there was controversy at that particular point in time as to just how much money had been lost or alleged to be lost in that particular project. And the recommendation from ISPAC that I'm reading from the report, Madam Speaker, was that we should get the regular reports from government itself, including details of any commitment fees that has been paid. If this was being done, Madam Speaker, the point I was making was that there would be no room for such controversy. I am not discussing the character of the President. I know that under the standing orders, if I wanted to do that, I would bring a motion. It is something I am happy to do, because there is many questionable conduct that we have seen from the head of state and his government. But I have not brought a motion yet. Madam Speaker, please protect me, because you are the chair of this session. Yes.
Senator Sifuna, let me give a finding with respect to what Senator Gloria has raised. I have looked at Standing Order 101, the mode in which Senator Sifuna has brought out that issue has not as of yet discussed any conduct that could be adversarial to the person of the presidency. So you may proceed to debate, but avoid raising the issue of questionable issues unless you're willing to give a justification.
I thank you for that direction, Madam Speaker. You know, the head of state is a former SG of ODM. He has the skin to take this criticism. I don't know why people or some senators on this floor feel the need to be overprotective of the president. The president has a thick skin, just like all SGs of ODM do. Madam Speaker, let me conclude by saying that in fact I would have expected to see some of these recommendations by ISPAC, because they are good recommendations, finding their way in their recommendations of the committee, and I don't understand why they have been ignored. And you should see this in the broader perspective of conversation about the place of public participation, Madam Speaker. Organizations such as this are comprised or represent very serious people. They take their time to come and appear before committees of this House in order for them to guide the House on what should be done and what should not be done. And Madam Speaker, it is only fair that the recommendations that they make find their way to the final report. Therefore, Madam Speaker, I want to say this, that yes, we might not be financial experts, but we are all concerned by the state of the country's debt and by some of the proposals that we have seen coming from government, whether they are going to be effective. It is not something to be taken lightly, Madam Speaker. When we as a country are offering the highest rates in a buyback of the Eurobond, just so that